Entrepreneurs, get counted today. Start Out, a San Francisco-based nonprofit, and SoCoast Labs recently announced their Inclusion Impact Indexes survey, focused on all U.S.-based entrepreneurs. The Diversity and Inclusion Survey measures entrepreneurs' economic impact in terms of job creation, patents, financing, and exits. If you've started a company in the U.S., get counted in this confidential survey. In-depth data findings are available for free online. Visit inclusionindexes.org.
Hello, everyone. It's Nina Quick and Monica Chandra on behalf of Colleen Blake and Eric Quick. Welcome to Bath Time to Boardroom, where we bring you stories of working parents or parents-to-be and how they now blend work and life and the challenges that come with it. I'm filling in this week for Miss Colleen Blake, who is off today. Not to worry, she'll be back. And since it's another All About Moms episode, we have a very special guest host, Miss Monica Chandra, who is taking over Eric's seat. So thank you for being with us, Monica.
Thanks for having me. Today we're talking to Sara Desphande, a partner with Maven Ventures and mom to Tommy and Ruby. Welcome, Sara.
Yes, welcome, Miss Sara.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. All the time.
I know, this is so much fun. It's like, I feel like we're recording, like hanging out, right?
I totally agree. Yes.
So we'd love to get into it. Let's start with bath time first. So Sara, tell us a little bit about your kids, Tommy and Ruby.
Yeah, totally. So I have two little ones. My son, Thomas, he goes by Tommy. He's almost 3. And Ruby, my little pandemic baby, is almost 10 months old, 9.5 months old now.
How does that happen so fast?
I know, especially in COVID times. It feels like a time warp. Things drag so slowly, and also kind of a rapid time warp at the same time. So I feel like we've blinked and a whole year or more of the pandemic has gone by, and she'll be turning a year old this summer, and it's crazy how fast it's flown.
Seriously, and tell me, I remember, like, you were just pregnant like 3 minutes ago is what I feel like. Like, honestly, and now I'm like, and I haven't even met Ruby yet because of the pandemic, which makes me so sad, but we'll get there. I'll get to be her auntie at some point. Can you tell me, like, what about them, like, makes you the most proud? Like brag a little bit on your babies.
Oh my gosh, so it's so easy. As moms know, it's so easy to brag on your kids. So Tommy is kind of an old man in a toddler's body. He's sort of like a very serious and thoughtful, tiny little man, and I love that about him. And what's fun about Tommy is he's very observant. He never misses anything. So if you're saying something, he's always listening. He always wants to know, Mom, why'd you say that? Hey, why does this person feel this way? He's very attuned to other people's feelings and to what's going on around him, and is always paying very close attention. And he's definitely really risen well into his big brother's shoes. So he was just he's 26 months when Ruby was born, and he's really just taken to that role, in such a sweet way. And I love seeing that about them. So, watching him kind of grow and mature and develop his own, feelings and thoughts about everything, and just be a super perceptive, and also just really empathetic little kid. So I love that about Tommy. He's also just like a tiny little brainiac, and he's like so smart, and it's hilarious to watch his little mind learn things. So I love that. And, Ruby is my total pandemic baby. She has a very tight quarantine bubble. She loves people from 6 feet away.
Right.
And, she just likes to keep, so sweet. She's so happy. She loves Tommy. And she's obsessed with her mama. So for sure, wow. I am definitely her number one favorite person, which is,
I'm going to just say treat. You embrace that. You hold that. You just enjoy and remember and bottle that for later.
I know.
Right?
Until they're tweens and teens. At the moment, I'm number one fave person.
Yeah, because I think Monica and I are both experiencing the other end as we have rising, soon to be all teenagers. And we're like, what happened? So can you tell me something funny that Tommy has maybe said? Because I'm sure you have a dictionary full of things, because that kid's a smart cookie.
Yeah, I'll tell you my favorite, because it's a perfect COVID timed story recently. So my husband and I went out, haven't been, going to restaurants or, doing,
Right.
anything like that. And so went for one of our very first outdoor dinners, just a month or so ago. And I came, downstairs and was in a dress and heels and had full makeup on. I'd fixed my hair, and Tommy saw me, and like the little hype man he is, truly gasped at my beauty. Said, he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, Mama, I love your costume." I'm like, oh my gosh, getting dressed for work, or like, normally you get dressed for work every day. Getting dressed to go out to dinner, he thinks I'm wearing a costume.
Well, don't we all dress up in costumes to go out, like in the world? I mean, right? Oh my
So
gosh.
anything that's not, Zoom meeting attire is apparently not a costume in our house.
Got it. Love it. Oh my God, that's so funny. So switching gears a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience growing up and maybe how that's influenced your own parenting style?
Oh yeah, totally. For people that know my parents, I'm totally a 50-50 blend, like half my dad, half my mom, like through and through. So we, grew up in a really close family. I'm a middle child. So I have an older brother and I have a younger sister. The three of us are still really close as siblings. And we moved a lot as kids. And so our kind of immediate family unit was definitely a big piece of, my life growing up as we moved from, I think I lived in 5 states before I went to kindergarten, and lived in maybe 8 states before finally landing in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I consider kind of my home now. I went to high school there and college there. So our kind of immediate family unit was always on the move. And so I think that's definitely been a foundation for what's, made us kind of close even as adults. And, my dad worked a lot. He worked super, super hard. He's like the hardest worker I know. And so I definitely think, and he always worked in, in retail businesses, and so kind of has a great mind for business, and that's I think where I always got my inclination of wanting to get an MBA, wanting to go to business school, wanting to work in finance, deciding to work in venture capital. And he's definitely somebody that I consult a lot even now on different business, whatever's going on at work, or getting advice on things, or stuff like that. Definitely get from my dad. And my mom is kind of the ultimate kind of fun hostess and wine drinker, and
She fits right in with us,
kind of unfazed by anything, and so I think that's definitely the kind of warm and caring and more kind of like family oriented side of things I definitely get from her. So I'm definitely like half and half of each of them.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh, I haven't met them, but someday I hope to. Because
Monica, what do you think? Is that an accurate description of the family? And
oh, I think you're the perfect blend of your parents. I mean, I see you as like your dad is this total go-getter, do this, do that. You're on top of all these things, and then I see your mom totally just sitting back. Something will happen. She's just not disturbed at all. And she just sits there and she laughs. And I think her sense of humor, you definitely have. Like, I see very few things that actually faze you.
Unflappable.
Thank you. That's amazing, because Monica's seen it all. So
yeah, for those of you who don't know, Sara is married to Monica's brother. So this is like a family event happening here on this podcast. It's so fun.
But for anyone listening, Monica predates my husband though in my life. So anybody listening should know that Monica and I were even friends first.
Yeah, the girls got to stick together, man. Yeah, we got to stick together and support each other.
We
right?
Really do. We really do. And I feel like I'm probably one of the few interviewers who actually know how to pronounce your last name.
I know.
Oh my gosh, so funny. So speaking of COVID and how Ruby is your COVID baby, I mean, you were pregnant for a good part of 2020 during the lockdown and stuff. What was it like to be pregnant during COVID? And, as things are changing now, how is that adjustment going?
Yeah, I was about 4.5 months pregnant when COVID hit. And we had a lot going on, in our lives at the time. I was just finishing my first year as a lecturer at Stanford GSB. I had started teaching a course there. So, that was going on in addition to investing, our third fund at Maven Ventures, which is a $65 million seed fund. I focus on consumer software. So I have a fund that I run and manage and invest. I've had a new position on the faculty at the Stanford GSB. We had just purchased our first home, and we're in the process of moving from San Francisco to Mountain View. I have Tommy, who at the time was about 20 months old, and I was 4 months pregnant with Ruby. So
totally like boring. Like
yeah,
you just had
so
nothing
like
but time
so
on your hands.
basic, really laid back. So COVID hit us pretty hard, and I think there was so much that was unknown at that time about pregnancy and the impact on young children, and that was a really challenging phase. At the same time, I think we were so focused on everything we had going on at work, and we had no childcare for our son. Right. And so we were watching him half time and kind of working around the clock to keep everything going. The venture capital, experienced just such a boom year. We had our best, our most investments ever, our best year at Maven ever at the same time as COVID was happening. And so there was just so much at work and so much at home that to some degree, we kind of just had to put on the blinders and stay in a really, really tight social bubble and sort of just power through, to get through it. And, I look back now and it definitely feels like, I can't believe we survived that. I can't believe we went through that. But it's really amazing to see and feel like there's the hope coming out kind of on the other side. And, I just feel really, really grateful to have made it through, in a really healthy way, and that our family was able to weather what was a really difficult time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it is so interesting that, COVID has just been so hard on so many people. And, it's for every person, there is a challenge, right? And you have to just meet your challenge the best you can and try to stay focused and positive and moving forward. And so I commend you on that, because that's not easy, regardless of your situation. So
yeah, that's so well said, because I definitely felt like the phase that we were at was really hard, watching a toddler and both parents working full time from the home, where we had very little of our original infrastructure because we just moved. And so we didn't have the childcare that we'd had before. We didn't have the friend network. We were in a new location. Thankfully we have, some family nearby, but also a lot of family that's not, close by. So, but at the same time, I did watch other people, at different stages of life. And I think everybody had their own, sense of challenges that they needed to work their way through. And on the flip side, like having a baby in COVID, like what an amazing bright spot, and I felt like, oh God, if not for that, like,
how was delivering during COVID? Like, how was AJ allowed to be with you, or like what happened?
Yeah. Thankfully, at the time that COVID started, and as I mentioned, I was about 4.5 months pregnant, in a totally delusional, as I was watching all the hospital lockdowns happen in New York, and things were getting very serious and people weren't allowed to have their spouses there. I had this moment. I said, but it's okay, because when Ruby is born, COVID will be over. It's very wishful thinking. So as we started to realize that wasn't going to happen, thankfully at the time that we were, that it was time for her to arrive, there was at least a little bit more that was known, and the case rate was very low in the Bay Area. And so we weren't allowed to have any other visitors, but AJ was there with me. I will say I've now delivered a baby wearing an N95 mask. So I feel as though there's nothing I can't do.
Oh my God, you had to wear a mask?
Oh yeah. I had to wear a mask the whole time. And, when they handed her to me for the first time, I couldn't, because she's so little, and they hand you your baby and you kind of look at the baby and you want to look and kiss your baby, but you can't because you got this mask on.
Oh, how weird.
And I was like, can I take off my mask? Can I take off my mask? And they were like, no.
When did you get to take off your mask?
Once they left the room, after she had arrived, and when the staff left the room, you could have your mask off when there was no one else in your room. No.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm just sorry. I'm floored by that, because that's that first moment, man.
Yeah. But people are, women and moms are capable of anything, right?
True.
So you feel like if you've been through that, there's truly nothing, there's truly nothing we can't handle.
And it was just delayed. It wasn't stopped forever, right? Just delayed. So, okay, I'm going to calm down now on your behalf. Because, the mama bear in me was like, what? That's not right. But then again, I had a baby who was in a NICU for 10 days. So I get it. We all do our thing, right? It's all different. Totally.
So true. So true. And then once we were in the hospital, honestly, it was kind of like a little mini retreat because you couldn't have visitors, you couldn't leave the hospital, you couldn't have anybody come see you, so I knew Tommy was well taken care of. We had, my parents and my sister thankfully were able to safely travel with COVID, and we're here watching him. And so, I knew he was well taken care of. So we just like watched movies, and the nurses came and took care of us. It was like a little mini hospital retreat.
I can fully relate to that. Yes. Completely agree. So I have another question for you here. So it seems like more often than not, and this was me too, that women are starting to have kids later in their career. So you're a little bit more established in your career, and you had Tommy in your early 30s. Can you tell us about that decision? Like, did that have, was that even a decision, or was that just when it was worked for you? Like, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of just a phasing in the time of life that worked out. And I think, in the Bay Area, I still felt like I was, a young mom, and I was having my kids on, an early time frame. And my
you
husband,
look like a young mom.
Oh,
like,
thank you.
You do. You totally like. I have the gray hair coming now, so I just try to hide that. But keep going. Sorry.
But yeah, AJ and I dated for a little over 5 years before we got married. So we had our phase of dating and, and solo time before we got married. And then we had Tommy. I got pregnant about a year and change after we got married. And then, Tommy obviously came 9 months later, eight months later. He was an early one.
Yeah.
It kind of just felt like the right rhythm and the right timing for us. And, I'm also from the Midwest where people tend to have their families a lot younger. So it was like, it felt very young and from the Bay Area perspective, but I also felt like, like the term, the advanced maternal age.
Yes. Because,
from the Midwest
I had,
perspective.
The perinatologist was like, yeah, you're not 22 anymore. I'm like, great, thanks. That doesn't help. You don't need to say that to me. I'm fine. We're good.
Well aware.
Yeah, exactly. So here's kind of a funny one, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. Since your kids are pretty young, I'm pretty sure you get some unsolicited advice, although maybe not as much since it's COVID and you haven't been out as much. What are some of the things, like, has somebody said something to you that was maybe like shocking and annoying, or maybe was there some helpful advice that was given to you that you didn't expect? She's thinking.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And in-laws, not in-laws, by in-laws I mean your brother-in-laws. Maybe did they give you some advice?
I'm having a hard time coming up with any unsolicited advice. I feel like I've asked for advice when needed and taken a lot of advice from, some super moms in my life, and, my sister-in-laws and friends that have kids, and my mom and my mother-in-law. So I've taken a lot of advice when asked for, and when not asked for, I sort of just put the blinders on.
Good job. I think that's a very healthy approach to take.
But you're right. Maybe, in the midst of COVID, there's certainly, Tommy was kind of a baby about town. We took him everywhere with us, and Ruby just hasn't had that same experience. So we haven't had quite as many interactions to solicit the
right.
unsolicited advice.
and you haven't had those public meltdowns, right? Where you kind of get the disapproving looks sometimes from folks in the grocery store.
Yes. Given that my children now do not go to grocery stores, we have avoided that.
Right. And I got to say, I feel like that's the best way to grocery shop is without them, but that's just my own thing. So, in your opinion, what are some things busy parents tend to overlook and maybe are unaware of?
Things busy parents tend to overlook. Oh gosh, I mean, it's hard to keep your mind on anything besides just the basic, the most important basic stuff to just keep your life running smoothly. To be honest, it's like if you feel like you can be really focused and perform at work, and at the same time, spend the extra time in the morning and the evenings that you have with your kids, to some extent, I think you have to be willing to let other stuff fall through the cracks. Totally. This phase of life is short, and so I think outside of those are kind of the two big focus areas. And I think you kind of have to be willing to overlook some other stuff.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. It's all about that balancing act, right? Of prioritizing and making sure that you're doing what you can with what you got at the moment. So I totally agree with you there. Sara, thank you so much for sharing with us. Before we dive into the boardroom though, let's hear what our sponsor Dope has to say.
Bakeable, legit cookie dough. We're dishing up nostalgia by the spoonful, delivered straight to your door. Our recipes start with just 6 all-natural ingredients, free from eggs and raw flour. With over 1,000 5-star reviews, this dough is Spoon Liquor approved. Best of all, a portion of every purchase is donated to support mental health care and addiction recovery. Unbox some happiness today with free shipping nationwide.
Welcome back, everyone. Sara, now let's dive into that boardroom portion of our interview. So
let's do it.
All right. So how did you begin advising early stage startups, and how did you find out that you were really interested in entrepreneurship?
I think it's a kernel that had always been there that I really discovered when I was in business school at Stanford. And when I was deciding, I mentioned earlier on, being definitely influenced heavily by my parents and having watched my dad's career, I had made this decision that I wanted to go to business school at a very young age. So I was probably 15 or 16 when I decided I wanted to get my MBA. And I hadn't even, gone to college yet, but I knew that was kind of the direction that I wanted to go. So when the time came to start applying for business schools, I really was looking for a school that was going to help me harness my kind of passion for using business as a great catalyst for positive social change. And I'd always had these kind of two areas of interest, one definitely being the more kind of like concrete finance business side of things, and the other just a desire to have a positive impact on the world. And I think, it's really influenced by, I went to Xavier, which is a school that is heavily, rooted in the Jesuit tradition, which really believes in using kind of all of the assets that you have to have a positive impact on the world. So I'd always kind of searched for this intersection of business and social change. And that's what took me to Stanford, and I think that the GSB has become so famous for its motto, change lives, change organizations, change the world. That is, it's the only school I applied to. As soon as I kind of found out about the program, that's where I wanted to go, and felt really, so fortunate to get accepted and have the opportunity to go to business school there. And that's really where I really kind of discovered for me that intersection of business and social change really was entrepreneurship. And I think that it's the greatest tool that, that our generation has to have a massive positive impact on the world. And as soon as I kind of uncovered that, it's so steeped in Silicon Valley, and it's so deeply rooted in all of the programs there that I was able to get kind of a crash course in early stage startups and what it meant to start a business from kind of the very early days, and what that was like to kind of bring something new into the world. And so I started working with startups while I was at the GSB, and that's really what took me down the path.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like a lot of us who have been in consulting before have a really hard time of letting go of that, because consulting kind of gives you that high. You get to jump from project to project, place to place. Everything is new. You get to do the deep dive, and then you're with it for a while, and then you get to pop out and you learn so much. And it's just really rewarding to be able to go on to the next project.
Yeah.
And did you feel like you're
being like a VC is sort of like being, borrows a little bit from my experience as a consultant, but a little bit from my experience of being an entrepreneur. And, with Maven, I joined the team very early on. I was the first employee. At the time that I became an employee at Maven, there was not even an employee infrastructure or payroll to bring me on as an employee. We had, under $10 million under management at the time. And so in some ways it was a startup. And so it's a great combination of being kind of that consultant advisor, borrowing from my, consulting background, but also kind of being in the trenches and working with those early stage founders, and kind of that desire and passion for entrepreneurship. Definitely kind of that combination.
And what's that experience been for you, sort of as a woman who is you are a partner in this industry of venture capitalism, and it's been typically dominated by men. So what's that experience been for you? Like, have you been treated differently at all, or has it been an asset to you?
It's a great question, and it still is. what I'll say is I think the industry has made a lot of progress in the 7 years that I've been at Maven. I think that the diversity of the leadership, the number of women in senior check writing roles, has evolved, and I have seen growth, but we certainly are still the minority. And there are, I can't remember what the stats were, but over 60%, I think it was 65% of venture funds still don't have a single female partner. And so, and those that do oftentimes, have only one or maybe just a couple. So, but I think we have seen, a big tidal wave of change, but we still are in the minority. And I got some really great advice from an incredibly successful woman in venture capital once that told me that if you paid attention to every single slight or perception of being treated differently, that it could bog you down and to the point of not being able to perform your job. And so I've tried to heed that advice sometimes to recognize that I think there are times where there is either implicit or explicit bias and different treatment, and I try to not focus on it too much so that I'm still able to perform my job, which is to invest in really great companies and generate amazing returns for our limited partners. And so, I try to the extent that I can, not let that, impact the performance. But I think I would be, it would be naive to say that there isn't a difference there, and that things, don't happen sometimes.
How has it been an asset to you, especially as you look at and focus on companies that are geared more towards women or towards parenting or children in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it absolutely has been. And particularly at Maven, because we focus on consumer software and investing in big consumer trends. And so if you can bring a consumer perspective to the partnership and to the field that's different, it is a huge asset, because you look at, women and moms control the majority of consumer spending, of healthcare decisions, of parenting decisions, of childcare decisions, and household spending kind of overall. So you start to look at just the power of the female consumer and the power of the mom, consumer is incredibly large. And so I think having empathy and being able to connect with that and bring those, insights into our fund have been really helpful. And I also think there's a growing number of women founders, and there's just a connection that comes from being, a woman investor and a woman founder. And so if I look at my portfolio of companies that I work really closely with, the diversity stats of that portfolio from a gender perspective are really, really strong. And I think a big piece of that is just is being able to kind of, relate in a different way, kind of woman to woman or mom to mom. And so I think in some ways it really has been an asset, and something that founders look for.
So you mentioned before too that you're a lecturer at the Stanford Business School, and I'm just curious, like how your experience over the last several years as an entrepreneur in the venture capital space, and also just going through this journey of becoming a parent. How do you manage to fit all that in to your schedule?
It's the kind of thing that when the opportunity comes, I just couldn't say no. I would never have imagined that I'd have the opportunity to be a lecturer for, I teach a course called Startup Garage, which is one of the most in-demand electives at the GSB. And it's because it helps people think about, how to start a business and actually practically apply, what they're, they come in with a team and a business idea, and they spend the entire 2-quarter class vetting and validating that business idea. And all the lecturers are former entrepreneurs and investors and VCs. And so I would never have thought at this point in my career that I would have had the chance to do that. And so, when the opportunity presents itself, I couldn't say no. So, we've made it work, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I think it's very additive to the work that I do at Maven, because it really keeps me kind of connected to the foundation of startups. Like, what does it mean to start, at that very early stage, and what is that early customer development, and kind of getting that feedback from your customers. And that's really what we teach in the course. And I love being able to spend time with students and give something back to the GSB as well. And so, it's been wonderful to be a part of that. And I do really enjoy doing it. And I think we've definitely had to, make things work at home. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about, but I think for women that have a desire to have a partner that's on equal footing, I think the single most important career decision you make is marrying someone that's going to pick up the slack, not really even pick up the slack. It's like you're both kind of on equal footing at home and with your career. And I think without that, it can be much harder to achieve the things that I would have wanted to do in my career, which I'm still, quite early in it in BC. So I guess perhaps a circuitous way of saying you got to have a team at home, and you got to be able to bring in resources to support to make it happen. But I've loved doing it. I'm glad to be able to do so.
What do you sort of take with you now after having gone through this time, being at home for 14 months, not really venturing out too much, but from a professional perspective, are things a little bit more clear for you in terms of what you'd like to see change moving forward, or what you kind of really liked during the pandemic?
I think it's an opportunity to be really intentional. And some of the things that have been really additive that have happened. We've grown our team. So we now have a team of 5 full-time as well as a part-time CFO. So it's the biggest team that we've ever had at Maven. Across the board, we all focus on early stage consumer software and funding companies that have what we call a vision worth fighting for, which is something that can get in the hands of millions or tens of millions of people. They'll use it every day and it makes their lives better. And with a bent towards kind of early stage technology and software. And so our entire investment team all focuses on kind of a similar thesis. But one of the things that the pandemic has allowed is we now have 2 team members in other parts of the country. And so we've had coverage in LA and in New York, where we haven't otherwise, in the past, I think we would have always felt like our whole team had to be full-time in the Bay Area. And now we don't feel that way anymore. So I think it's opened up, the ability to bring in teammates that are in other places and have coverage of startups in other markets, which I think has been huge. It's also really allowed us to open up the top of our funnel, to entrepreneurs and to companies we might not otherwise look at. So when we ran the numbers last year, even though I spent half the year, doing, childcare and working at the same time, with the toddler at home, and I went on, parental leave when I had Ruby, I met more companies in 2020 than I met the year before. Even with all of those demands, and a big piece of it is because we met them all on Zoom. And so, Maven's an early investor in Zoom, and it was crazy to see kind of the rise of that company into people's, the forefront of people's lives. And I think it really enabled us to just have a broader top of the funnel to meet more great founders than we ever could have before. And so I think in many ways, we're kind of reaping and really, we'll continue on the positives that came from a fully, shift to remote work. And at the same time, really looking forward to connecting in person with people and getting back to, building those relationships and seeing people in person as well. So slowly starting to do that more, which has been really fulfilling.
And as things open up and people sort of start to address the questions of, do we go back in the office? Do we continue to work from home? Do we do some type of hybrid model? I think the school system has really corrupted the word hybrid.
Hybrid's the worst of both worlds.
But are there, as we go through this change, like it's going to be a transition now, I think, for the next year or two. Are there specific areas you feel like entrepreneurs should be addressing in light of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we spend a lot of time within our team just kind of thinking about what do we foresee as future consumer trends and what are some of the behaviors that we think are here to stay. And so we actually sat down as a team last March, about a week after the COVID lockdown, and said, okay, what behaviors do we think are going to change and where should we be looking to invest? And some of the areas that we outlined were, number one, we really believed that Zoom was going to rise as a platform, and companies that were going to be built on top of Zoom were going to be a huge business opportunity. So we've invested in 10 companies since then that are all built on top of the Zoom ecosystem. We're probably the number one VC investing in companies that are built on top of Zoom now, because of our focus on that. The second thing that we looked at was mental health. And we've always had a digital health portfolio, and I've always looked at early consumer health companies, but we knew that mental health was going to be virtual mental health, and the ability to connect with practitioners digitally and over Zoom was going to be huge. And so we invested into mental health companies that are built on top of Zoom and connecting people to mental health care through video. So those are a couple of areas that we looked at. And now, as we think of coming out of the pandemic, there's always trends that we're watching. A big one for me has been a category that we call future of families, which is looking at what, we look at our work lives, and with Zoom and Slack and Asana and Trello and Notion, and you look at all of the tools that have been created and become billion-dollar companies to help make our work lives more productive, and it's amazing. And then you look at the innovation to help with our home lives, and there's nothing. And so much has changed about the kind of American family structure. We now have more dual income and dual career couples than ever before. The vast majority of children live in a home where all available adults are working. And for the most part, we don't live near our families and our, historical community structures. Like if you would think of, living near your family or a church that you grew up in, or kind of those traditional structures. So kind of with all the demands on a family's home and the lack of infrastructure, kind of what's going to catch and what's going to be that safety net that really helps, kind of like save parents that are really at the brink before COVID, but I think, even more so since COVID. So a big area that we're looking at now is software technology for families to help make their lives more, efficient and productive. And some other areas of interest, I think technology for seniors is a huge category we're looking at now. I think there was always this, like grandma can't email, kind of trope, which is just totally not true. Like I think, people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are more technical than ever before. And I think, again, the pandemic really accelerated that, because that's how they stayed in touch with their kids and their grandkids. And so,
and I gotta say, Sarah, to that point, like I work on political campaigns and in the texting area of it. And most of our texters are over the age of 60 and retired, because they've got time and they can figure out Spoke and Slack and all this stuff. I think you're right on target there.
Yeah, so the massive, consumer behavior shift that's kind of happening there. And then the last I'll mention is really kind of the side hustle economy, because I think, particularly for Gen Z, everybody now has a side hustle, or could be a creator, or is looking for a second source of income. And so whether it's a creator economy or a new source of income for moms or parents, or just young people always kind of like trying to get a side hustle off the ground, we're definitely looking at new investments there. And so definitely, I think some new, areas that we're watching closely coming out of the pandemic.
I think that COVID really accelerated or made it more visible to working parents, the challenges of being with your kids and being in a home and managing your home at the exact same time that you're trying to manage your work. And I am really excited to see what's going to happen in that space.
Yeah, a couple of companies that I'll mention I think might be of interest to folks and are definitely in this category. One is a company we invested in, which is called Daybreak Health, which helps provide mental health for teens. And I think COVID has really shined a light on the mental health issues teens are facing. But it wasn't just COVID; it was the kind of relentlessness of school and competitiveness and the college application process. And I think today's teenagers have so many more pressures on them than we all did growing up. And so it's a mental health company that uses Zoom to help connect therapists and counselors directly with teens, and works with their parents to help get them the mental health care that they need. So, massive market opportunity and something that we think is going to have a lot of, benefit on teens' lives. And another I'll mention that's in the Zoom realm is a company that's called Pledge, which helps. It's a fundraising technology. It's an amazing company. So the vision of Pledge is to put a donate button everywhere that you already are online. And what they've noticed is that there's just a rise of kind of conscious consumerism. Like people care about, causes, whether it's, supporting the effort of racial equity and Black Lives Matter, or climate change, or, Nina, to your point, political causes. There's just more money and energy flowing toward conscious causes than I think there really ever has been before. And so Pledge is working, they'll be deeply integrated in Zoom, but also, with, and many other places online to help people kind of channel their dollars to nonprofits that they care about, kind of anywhere that they might already spend time or money. And so those are the types of investments that we have in our portfolio that kind of really exemplify that vision worth fighting for, and also we think have a big business opportunity and will grow coming out of COVID for sure.
Great. Well, we've had a chance to cover the bath time. Now it's actually time for rapid fire 5. So the way this works is I'm going to ask you 5 questions in rapid succession. with only 2 or 3 answers that you have to select. Okay. Are you
Okay.
ready?
I'm
All
ready.
right. You've got an hour alone at home. Do you nap or do you have a solo dance party?
Nap.
Long weekend getaway, Las Vegas or New Orleans?
Oh, that's not fair.
Pick one, baby. Come on, let's go.
Oh God, I'm sorry, New Orleans, but I got to go to Vegas.
I think Monica would agree with you.
I would, definitely. Bucket list, running a half marathon or participating in an all-you-can-eat food competition?
Ooh, I don't think the half marathon is in the cards for me, so I'll have to say food competition.
iOS or Android?
This is a loaded question for folks that don't know that our families are very deeply integrated into the Google ecosystem, we'll say, but I have an iPhone.
Yay!
Woo! Me too. Okay, iced coffee or hot coffee?
Hot coffee.
Fantastic. So now we're going to move on to our pocket perspectives. And this is a quotable one-liner, a mantra, or a tweet that you resonate or live by that you want to share with our listeners. So if you want, I'll go first. So my pocket perspective, something that I think that I kind of really resonated with what you were saying was that, sometimes it's okay to have your blinders on and to kind of block out that extra noise out there, especially if it's negative, so that you can just do what you got to do. So I really appreciated you mentioning that in the beginning, and that is my pocket perspective. Do you have one to share, Sarah?
Yeah, I do. And since this is a bath time and boardroom, I will throw it back to great personal and professional advice. I think that we were always raised in a big mantra from our parents was just to do your best. And it's so simple, but it's so true. And so I think if we can, put that to practice, and also a good thing to teach the little ones. So do your best. That's going to be my pocket perspective.
I love that. I absolutely agree with that. Okay, Monica, your turn.
This is always hard. I always start out with something and then I listen to the interview and I'm like, oh, that's really good advice. So I'm going to say, soak up every second. Try to enjoy each stage of parenting before your kids move on to the next.
I can resonate with that as well, because, especially seeing Sarah, you with Ruby, who's 10 months old, and remembering that time. And now I've got a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and I'm in this totally different stage. So yes, I absolutely agree with that. Well, I just want to say a special thank you to you, Sarah, for being our guest today. And Monica, for you, for sitting in for Eric. It has been so much fun. I mean, Sarah and Monica, I could sit and talk to you guys for days. So getting this condensed into under an hour is like a little bit of a challenge, but I've loved it. It's been so much fun. And that's a wrap, everybody. Until next time, whether it's bath time or in the boardroom, remember to cherish these moments and get out there and make a splash. And also be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or Google Play. We won't forget them. Thanks so much, everybody. All right, Monica, it's time for our favorite part of this podcast. Do you have a dad joke or a mom joke to share?
I do. I always have dad jokes and mom jokes to share.
I know.
So why do dads take an extra pair of socks when they go golfing?
I don't know. Why?
In case they get a hole in one.
Okay, here's mine. How do you follow Will Smith in the snow?
How?
You follow the Fresh Prince. Got another one?
I do. So if April showers bring May flowers, what do Mayflowers bring?
I don't know.
Pilgrims.
All right, here's my last one. Okay. And I don't know, maybe some of y'all can relate to this one the way I do, but I thought the dryer was shrinking my clothes. Turns out it was the refrigerator all along.
I'm still pondering that one.
as I'm eating all the food in the refrigerator.
Oh.
Thanks for playing, everyone.